The Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE study, is an ongoing study between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. Here with how childhood trauma results in adult physical and mental illness is the study's co-principal investigator, Dr. Vincent Folletti. The ACE study is a major part of the new book, Cheering for the Children, Creating Pathways to Hope for Children Exposed to Trauma, written by former San Diego City Attorney Casey Gwinn, founder of the National Family Justice Center and Camp Hope. Welcome to Evening Edition.
Great to be with you.
Now, Casey, I understand a young girl at the camp named Jasmine inspired the title of this book. How'd she do that?
She did a number of years ago. I had seen her at the shore of the lake when we were running camp in East San Diego County, and she was being so kind to these frogs that were hopping around and putting them in a little jar, and then she'd let them go. So that night at the campfire, I called her up in front of the whole group, and I said, I just want to honor Jasmine for her kindness to the frogs. And everybody clapped and cheered, and it was really fun. And then after the campfire, she came up to me and said, thank you. That's the first time anybody's ever cheered for me. And it had never dawned on me that kids growing up with violence and abuse and trauma don't really have a bunch of people cheering for who they are or who they can be. And that became the title of the book.
And when you're talking cheering for a child, you're not just saying, patting them on the head and saying you're awesome.
Right, we're really talking about ways that you figure out how you can invest in their lives. I say in Cheering for the Children, every child needs at least one person that passionately loves them, believes in them, cares about them, and sticks with them, and causes them to realize who they can be and what they can become.
Now, Dr. Folletti, Casey's book references your Adverse Childhood Experience, or ACE study, which reveals the startling link between childhood trauma and serious health issues like obesity, cancer, heart disease, mental illness, IV drug use, things like that. What kinds of traumas are measured in this ACE study, and how prevalent are they in the population?
We measured 10 common kinds of trauma, and they were unexpectedly common. We got into this by accident, really. Major physical abuse, contact sexual abuse, major emotional abuse, major emotional neglect, major physical neglect, and 5 categories of household dysfunction, serious household dysfunction, growing up in a home where mother's being beaten, where one of the members of your household is imprisoned, where somebody is chronically depressed or mentally ill, someone's an alcoholic or a drug user, without both biological parents.
And the prevalence was about?
Was really startling. I mean, for instance, in a clearly middle-class population, 74% had been to college, etc. 28% of the women and 16% of the men acknowledged a history of contact sexual abuse.
A large number. I understand the study showed that in these 10 categories, it didn't matter how the abuse or the trauma took place, the difference between, let's say, sexual trauma.
That too
right.
was a great surprise, that the 10 categories were essentially co-equal.
But however, they accumulate when it comes to the links to health issues, correct?
Yes, what we did was we counted the number of categories to which people were exposed, not events or incidents, but categories. And then we measured their health status and well-being roughly a half century later. And the way this played out a half century later was absolutely extraordinary. For instance, a person experiencing any 6 of the categories was, at some later point in their life, 4,600% more likely to become an IV drug user than a person experiencing none of the categories. A person experiencing any 6 of the categories at some point later in their life was between 3,100 and 5,000% more likely to attempt suicide.
So there's staggering outcomes for this link. Casey, how are you using these ACE score to help kids at Camp Hope?
Well, we really made a decision. We started Camp Hope 13 years ago. We weren't really measuring anything in the kids. After I became really educated on the ACE study, engaged with Dr. Folletti, we decided to start administering ACE at Camp Hope. And last summer, we started giving the 10-question ACE score survey to our kids. Our average score was 6 for all kids at Camp Hope last summer from all over California, coming from family justice centers, domestic violence shelters, foster care systems. We're our kids are those kids that have those 6 scores. And we realized not only do we have to understand what's happened to them, let them tell their story, help them understand why they have so many consequences and so much rage inside them. But then we also started using something called the hope scale to start measuring hope in their lives. So now we're measuring their trauma and we're measuring hope, and we're following it longitudinally to figure out how to change the ending for these kids.
And this is at the kid level, but we'll have to end on this, Dr. Folletti. You've said your ACE study is not being used widely by the medical community. What should an adult do if they realize that they have serious health risk and or have had childhood trauma?
Well, that's a good and a difficult question. My best thought would be to find someone whom you trust to speak with about this, to share the information. Because what we found is that being able to tell something shameful about oneself to another person and realize that you are still accepted by this person is a very powerful and beneficial tool.
All right, unfortunately, we are out of time, but we have more information on this on our website, kpbs.org. Dr. Vincent Folletti and Casey Gwynn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Peggy.